Hi all and welcome to the Truth, Honour and Integrity show. My name's Thomas Williams. We've got a show, it's fairly packed. I've managed to cobble together a bit of a show anyway. Much of my time was taken up this week with various things that have been ongoing. Such is life these days, a lot of fun and games. And of course, also I did 4 shows in 4 days. We had this Thursday show, and then we went not only across the pond but across the globe to Kaz and her show in Australia, and we had a rather interesting show there, I thought. You know, we covered I think it's easier to say what we didn't cover than what we did, and it was like a full-on synopsis of THI in many ways, and it appears most liked it. Some didn't. Generally, the religious community, and that's fine. They will learn over time when it's their time. But it was a fun show. Then we had the Zoom call on, which was supposed to clarify certain clarifications, but it appeared it didn't. So we'll have another Zoom call at the weekend and clarify and re-clarify certain things. Like everything else that starts off anew, there's always minor hiccups in there, and we'll overcome that and go forward. And then, of course, on Sunday we had a rather interesting show with Alan and his new radio show format of The Circle of White Light, all about solutions and the problems we face of what we have to overcome, and that was interesting as well. So right, let's get into what this week's show's all about. I'll be covering aspects of THI groups near the end of this hour. For those who didn't attend the Zoom call, obviously a lot more listening on a Thursday than the Zoom call, so we'll get into that shortly. Link for the show. If you want to listen live, it's every Thursday, 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Spreaker.com/user/8955881. We have the THI website, and that's thinkdifferent.thepeoplesclub.org. All the archives of the shows on there, the grounding, centering and shielding documents, and how to deal with psychic attacks. The must listen to shows. You know, if there's some of Kaz's listeners who enjoyed last Friday's show, you can get a full download of and go into greater depth some of the things I covered. It's all in the must listen to section. Listen to them in order. They are like a storybook. And we have all the Kim and the Manor World Holding Trust shows in a separate section, so you can catch up with everything there. You can catch me on YouTube, providing they stop banning my videos. Another one of Lucid Dreamers has been flagged up this week because they put R in the caption, "Are whites being marginalised?" That was deemed inappropriate by YouTube this week. It's funny when we've got Black Lives Matter all over the place and all kinds of African things, you know, and yes, the minute anyone mentions the term white, oh no, you can't have that. Anyway, you can find me on the Tommy Williams channel on YouTube, and the email for the show is truth.honor.and.integrity@gmail.com. Honor is spelled the American way, in case you get mistaken with that. We have the Facebook group Truth, Honour and Integrity, and the Facebook social media alternative on MeWe.com, and that's Truth, Honour and Integrity also. We have the People's Club website, and that's all about the foundation, and that's thepeoplesclub.org. Right, let's get into a much reduced news section tonight. a few things that need to be covered, and then we'll get into some Q&A, and then I'm going to focus on the THI state and country groups before we go into a fairly substantial list of intel. ExxonMobil Corporation this week posted their worst refining performance in almost 2 decades, which may revive questions about the so-called integrated model engineered by its founder, John D. Rockefeller, and also espoused by every CEO in the company's 149-year history. Now, the surprise loss in a business line Exxon typically relies on to prop up more volatile units eroded in the first quarter this year, and the profits were down considerably and cast doubt on the strength of the oil titan's comeback from its horrible year last year in 2018. They're struggling. And the company's fuel-making plants lost $256 million between January and March this year, an average of almost $3 million a day. Now, as I just said, it's that portion of the company is what funds the rest of it, because the rest of it is running at a loss. So when the profit-making portion that can't subsidise the rest collapses, and maybe we're seeing the first signs of a major oil company collapse, which will set off a domino effect. So they lost almost $3 million a day between January and March this year, as hefty stockpiles of gasoline squeezed margins and extensive repairs and mechanical overhauls slowed down output. Now, Exxon's chemicals business also disappointed investors with a 49% slump in profit. Now, according to the RBC Capital's market analyst, said in a note to clients titled "A Downstream Shocker," clearly the corner is further away than we expected, and we expect this to lead to underperformance in the near term. The shares slumped 2.5% after earlier slipping as much as nearly 5%. And Exxon's disappointing refining and chemical results overshadowed what it says a booming crude output from wells in the Permian Basin of West Texas. No, it's not a booming crude output coming from West Texas and New Mexico. What that is related to the intel given, was it last week or the week before, where they're shipping in oil stolen out of Iraq, parts of Iran and other places. That's why it's booming there. It's fake. And daily worldwide production increased 2.4% to the equivalent of 3.9 million barrels from a year earlier, aided by an almost 140% surge in Permian output. It's not Permian. Permian is the West Texas. It's not Permian output at all. It's delivered oil that was stolen. Per share earnings were 55 cents compared with 72 cents a year earlier, and the last time Exxon's refinery lost money was 2009, and the first quarter shown was the worst in data going back to 2001. Nice to hear the oil people are in trouble, and this is why your gas prices have gone up. So, when people often come out with blanket statements, just get rid of this, they don't realise the knock-on cause and effect. It does have implications elsewhere, which too often people don't think about. Donald Trump weighed in on the recent measles outbreak last week, appearing, quote-unquote, to do an about-face on his previous claims linking child vaccinations to autism. And according to this piece, he says they have to get the shots. The vaccinations are so important. This is really going around now. They have to get the shots. Trump told Clinton News Network Joe Johns on Friday when asked what his message was for parents. Now, measles cases in the United States have surpassed the highest number on record, according to the Portal people, since the disease was declared eliminated nationwide in 2000. That means that the World Health Organization reintroduced it. And I'm not joking either. As of Monday, the US Centers for Disease Control and Prevention reported 626 individual cases of measles confirmed in 22 states. And this includes illnesses reported by state health departments to the CDC through the 19th of April, therefore does not include cases reported since then. Now, on Wednesday, a Clinton News Network analysis of data from state and local health departments put the total number of cases at 681 out of 330 million. Just to put it into perspective, I wouldn't pay much attention to Trump's input on that, to be honest. US President Donald Trump said he will withdraw his country from the International Arms Trade Treaty this week. The agreement signed by Mr. Obama back in 2013, which essentially handed over control to the UN, aims to regulate the sales of weapons between countries. Yeah, like that works. Now, the US National Rifle Association says the treaties amount to international gun control and is a threat to America's Second Amendment right to bear arms. Now, speaking at the lobbying group's annual meeting, Mr. Trump said he would ask the US Senate to not ratify the pact. Now, the US is the world's top arms exporter, which is not something we should be proud of personally. And its weapons sales are 58% higher than those of Russia, who are the second world largest exporter. And we're taking our signature back, the President said at a meeting in Indianapolis, adding that the UN would soon receive formal notice of the US's withdrawal from the Arms Trade Treaty. And he went on to say, under my administration, we will never surrender, quote, American sovereignty, unquote, to anyone. We will never allow foreign bureaucrats to trample on your Second Amendment freedoms, and that is why my administration will never ratify the UN Arms Trade Treaty, which is not a treaty because they're not sovereign anymore. Pope Francis has decided, in his wisdom, to donate $500,000, $500,000 to help migrants stranded in Mexico. Nice move. One wonders why it's taken so long, that the Catholic Church will help the 1 or 2 billion Catholics around the world, most of which are in poverty. But I suppose it's best that it comes at some point. And it's to help migrants stranded in Mexico as they try to reach the US border, the Vatican said. And the money comes from the Catholic Church's Peter Pence Fund. I wonder if that's related to Mike Pence. He seems to get about that guy, and he's never up to much good. From church collections around the world. Yeah, right. And a statement said that vital aid for the migrants was falling as global media coverage of the crisis decreased. And the Pope has previously criticised Donald Trump's aim of building a wall to keep migrants out. It's not about keeping migrants out. It really needs to be updated as to the real reason. And the US has put pressure on Mexico's government to stem the so-called caravans of people from Central America heading north. In 2018, 6 migrant caravans entered Mexico for a total of 75,000 people. And the arrival of other groups was announced, the Peter Pence office said. All of these people were stranded, unable to enter the United States without a home or livelihood, and the Catholic Church hosts thousands of them in the hotels within dioceses or religious congregations, providing basic necessities from housing to clothing. Many of the migrants say they are fleeing persecution, courtesy of the US military, violence and poverty in their home countries. Last week, officials detained nearly 400 migrants travelling through Mexico's southern Chiapas state trying to reach the US. Media coverage of this emergency has been decreasing. That's because they were focusing on Russian collusion, that's why. And as a result, aid to migrants by the government and private individuals has also decreased, the fund added. The father and 2 brothers of the alleged organiser, bear in mind they've come up with 3 different groups for now, which suggests they're covering up another group, of the Easter Sunday bombings in Sri Lanka, Zaran Hashim, were killed in a security forces operation on Friday, the police say. Dead men can't talk, you see. And according to the officials, Mr. Hashim blew himself up at a hotel in Colombo, which was founded by an Islamist group, the NTJ. Was it INTJ or ITNJ? Which has now been banned. Police have raided the group's headquarters in the eastern town of Katankudi, and the Sri Lankan president has announced a ban on face coverings aimed at Muslim women following the attacks. Security forces raided a house near Hashim's hometown of Katankudi on Friday, and it was alleged gunmen opened fire as the troops moved in, the police say, and 3 men set off explosives, killing themselves, 6 children and 3 women. 3 other people died in gunfire. All very convenient, isn't it? President Trump has filed a lawsuit this week and is suing 2 banks in a bid to stop them handing over his financial records to Congress. The lawsuit against Deutsche Bank and Capital One was filed after Democrat-led committees had issued subpoenas for information on his finances. Now, his 3 eldest children and the Trump Organization was added to the lawsuit, which argues there is no legitimate grounds for investigating his business affairs. But leading Democrats said they would not be deterred by the blocking attempt, and a Deutsche Bank spokeswoman told the New York Times, "We remain committed to providing appropriate information to all authorised investigations." Well, they would, wouldn't they? They're Nazis. Langley too. There was no immediate comment from Capital One, and the lawsuit was filed in New York on Monday and aims to block the banks from complying with the subpoenas issued by the Democrat-controlled Congress. During World War II, as it was coming near an end, this would have been an op-ed piece, but I've got other things to cover. You know, you would think the primary concern would be healing or getting people's lives, Dutch people's lives back in order. Except that's not how it works, as we all know. And as World War II neared an end, Dutch Queen Wilhelmina sought a deal with the Nazis to save the Belgian royal family. Let's all look after who they think is important. This is according to newly published diaries of her foreign minister. Now, by late March 1945, Belgium and the southern Netherlands had been liberated, but Belgium's King Leopold III was being held captive in Austria. Leopold's mother feared that the Nazis would murder the family, so Wilhelmina considered a possible exchange. She asked a foreign minister in exile in London, Eelco van Kleffens, to sound out via the Vatican whether high-ranking Nazis could be offered an escape route in return for the Belgian royal family's release. To protect so-called famous people who are not really, they're just fake titles and overprivileged, in my opinion. They're going to let the same people who bludgeoned the Dutch people just go free. This is what they do. This is according to Michael Raymond, who has just published the Minister's Diaries, and the revelations shed further light on how top Nazis were trying to negotiate their escape from Europe in the dying days of the war. Many high-ranking Nazis were successfully spirited away to Latin America, including Adolf Eichmann, Joseph Mengele and Klaus Barbie, and Mr. Hitler also. Until now, we have never heard of the Dutch playing a role, said Mr. Ryman's, whose book Majesty, You Don't Know Real Life, features the diaries. Yes, we don't know real life at all. Those people don't live in the real world. They never did. The mayor of Baltimore has resigned today, a month after taking a medical leave amid a growing scandal over sales of her self-published children's book series. That sounds like it means something else, that, to me. Now, Miss Pugh submitted a letter of resignation today and is effective immediately, according to attorney Stephen Silverman. She did not attend, and Silverman took no questions. Pugh's defiant pledge last month to return to work gave way after federal agents raided their home and the City Hall office a week ago. She is expected to become the second Baltimore mayor in a decade to quit in the face of criminal investigations. Final news piece, which is more to do with the comment that follows, rather. The new theatre and film box offices contains an awful lot of Marvel characters, the Avengers and etc. And the latest one, Avengers Endgame, broke $500 million barrier in China on Thursday, becoming the most successful foreign film ever in the country after just over a week in theatres and easily eclipsing the previous title holder, The Fate of the Furious. What's kind of interesting is how people are fascinated by these particularly comic series, because what those comic series are about are the very beings who mess with humanity. All of them. All the gods. They're your gods of the past, all wrapped up in a little comic book, the Batman, etc. It's kind of from an overview point of view how people are entranced by the gods, and every one of them didn't give a monkey's shite about us and mistreated us rather badly. Right, let's get into some Q&A. In the recent piece about New York City and Gotham, I suspect some here weren't surprised by a certain revelation that one of the many reasons for 9/11 was the ritual transfer the Babylon entity Akka, the Horde of Babylon, Dark Mother, and so on, to its new home of New York City. With Babylon, you can trace its migration from east to west over millenniums, with a few restart points due to worldwide cataclysms. Yes, cat indeed. And from the last reset, the city in Mesopotamia, known as Babylon, became the dark centre of the world. Babylon then moved to the UK. Baby Lon Done. That's where it moved to. And Babylon, by default, became the name of this dark essences in this current 7,500 year span. Yes, I agree. But it got transferred because the new god became money. And where is the main financial centre of the world? London. Baby Lon Done. Don means borough. Babylon, borough. Did the city known as Jerusalem serve as Jerusalem, positive forces, and Babylon, negative forces? I wasn't looking at it in those terms. Yes, the peoples of Jerusalem, which was in Russia originally, were a lot lighter than the entities in Babylon, who are inherently dark in more ways than one. Is modern Jerusalem still Jerusalem, or did it move on? No, that modern Jerusalem is, how can I put this, fake, to put it bluntly. You know, it's been, because of a certain book, it's been highlighted. You know, they tell you that God's chosen ones needed to go back there. That's not what it actually said in the book, actually. What it said in the book is the chosen lands were to go as far south, west, to the Nile, which includes half of Egypt, all the way down to what is known as the Big Bend in the River Nile, which is just past the pyramids, if I remember correctly, across the top third, near a half of Saudi Arabia, all the way across to Kuwait and southwest Iran, up to Turkey and back again, which swallows, like I said, at least a third of Saudi Arabia. It swallows Jordan, it swallows Lebanon, it swallows Syria, parts of Turkey, 2/3 of Iraq, and Kuwait. That was their so-called chosen land. And this is when you look on a map, and then the reason the focus is on Iran is that's blocking the trip back to India. For those of you who are familiar with my series From Russia with Love, you'll know why. Look at it on the map. Look what the country is south of Saudi Arabia. Is that country at war? Then look across south of the Nile. Look at the countries there. Have they been involved in war? And when you reached Ethiopia, which was the final Garden of Eden, then you'll understand why there's wars in that region, because it's expanding the old caliphate for the so-called chosen ones, except they're not. Trump's words about Israel really had me take a step back with Trump. He really needs to distance himself from that regime running a modern day concentration camp. I'm not too pleased, not because it's Israel. I'm not too pleased of being in bed with any faction, but sometimes you have to get in bed with the enemy to defeat another enemy, but then ultimately you have to distance yourself. There's far too many, far too much of American politics and funding and military planning and spending that involves that one country. It's a ridiculous amount of waste, and it needs to be addressed. Now, I'm hoping further down the line it will, so we'll see. Across North America, Norse-like rune relics have been found in practically every state or province. Mainstream science says it was impossible for Scandinavians to traverse the Atlantic Ocean at any point prior to modern times, and these relics are fake or brought by modern descendants. Mainstream science. They're about as useful as mainstream media. You know, the history goes way further back than the so-called Catholic Church's 6,000 years. You know, Göbekli Tepe is 11,000 years, and the Urs and the Rus is 110,000 years ago. You know, so we'll ignore what they have to say. And yes, the Vikings, around 1,000 years ago, along with the Templars, made it to that region. A new theory speculates the runes are older, perhaps 1,000 years or more, 1100 AD. This rune alphabet doesn't match most known European Scandinavian rune alphabets. And this theory also speculates that the Western rune relics are older than the Eastern, and put forth the placement was from the Pacific to the Atlantic. And also several tribes across the western half of North America knew of white people well before the arrival of the European explorers to the Americas. Could these explorers be from the Rus-Slavonic area? Yes. They were here long before. Long before. You know, this is the problem with his story. It's riddled with timelines that fit into the other books' stories, particularly the Bible. You have no idea how much the Bible impacts timelines, because it all has to fit in with that book, and it has a big impact. And that's why science and so many others are trying to squeeze in stuff that fits into the Bible timeline. Well, it doesn't. The real, you know, the Bible is not our story largely. I know some people won't like that answer, but if you look at it objectively, it's talking about star beings. It's not our story. Well, I know for a fact, but if you analyse it yourself, the book doesn't make much sense unless you apply an extraterrestrial slant to it. Then it makes much sense. And that's where my belief comes from, is it's not our book, it's not our story. No one on this planet can guarantee it was written by certain people with certain ideals. You only assume. That's not fact or truth. You are assuming. Now people can get into, well, that's my belief, and that's fine. But a belief is not truth, is it? Much of our narrative, our everyday narrative, is based on assumptions. When you really analyse, you know, you can mention any discussion. You know, people have said it in the previous shows. Does Australia exist? Well, the people of Australia know, and the people who visit it know. But does that, if you haven't been, you're assuming because you haven't experienced it. And there's so much of our narrative that is based entirely on assumptions. And the Rus were all over the world. They had to be to counter the dark forces who were spreading the Kali Ma sacrifice program throughout all the tribal people. You know, it went all the way from India to Egypt, through the Middle East, into Africa, and then across to South America in Peru, and the Mayans and the Aztecs. They were all doing it. You know, and so, like, you can't get a group of people who have never met each other all over the world suddenly all decide that they're going to build a pyramid. And the same applies, is you can't get people who allegedly ever met each other all deciding that they're going to sacrifice their children for the so-called gods, unless there was interaction with those gods. And yet people will deny ETs exist. So are all the tribal people who have experienced that, are they all lying? This is the way people have really got to analyse it. It's not what you believe in, it's what you analyse and what you deduce with an open mind. The letter J, I know it was introduced in the 15th century, correct, but it seems to have been a major player in writing the English language. Judge, jury, justice, jail, Jesus, Jerusalem, Jew. Most people are never told that the J never existed, and yet a whole religion uses the letter. I also can't help but think of the fact it is shaped as a fish hook. Good point. And everything that goes onto it, such as bait, in order to catch a fish, and then thinking of the Jesus fish symbol, which is the Vesica Pisces, the loop, in other words. Hopefully you haven't covered it too much before, just wondering if there's anything deeper going on. Yeah, you said it all there. You know, much of the control system, judge, jury, justice, jail, all with the letter J. Why? Why were so many names in the Bible with the letter J when if it was written at the time that they said it was, there was no letter J? And if Jesus is so important, and I'm not denying that fact, why would you change someone's name? The most important being in the last 2,000 years, and you change his name? Does that make sense? Well, it doesn't. Why is Job and John all in that book when the letter never existed? Again, with an open mind and not stuck to the belief system of that of what religion is. People have to come to their own conclusions, not make excuses to fit the narrative, which is what mainstream science does. It's got to fit in with what they know. No, that never works. And why, if so many people, the whole book is based on the Middle East and Jerusalem and Judea, why are all the disciples got British names? Again, if they're that important, why have you anglicised those names? Why haven't they stayed Middle East names? So it wouldn't be the book of Thomas, it would be Thomas, would it not? You know, people will believe what they want to believe, and people hang on very tightly to religion because they are intent on externalizing everything, when everything, including their God, is internal. Those people are going to have a very difficult time going forward, because none of their story makes any sort of sense. None of it. Once you analyse it from an overview point of view where you're not connected or invested in it. I often think that the chances politicians, military judges and even CEOs are MK Ultra mind control victims, slaves, is super high. Of course, they could also be a form of ET or synthetic or chipped clone, and this includes Trump, Pence, most of all other leading Congress people and judges. Are you aware of this to be true? There is aspects of doubles. There was aspects of cloning. There is was aspects of cloaking is the best way, not shapeshifting. Cloaking. There's only one ET group that can do that, but it's cloaking, a bit like what the Sasquatch do. If they detect people have tuned into them, they can essentially plug into your brain and change your thinking pattern to think you're looking at a tree and not a Sasquatch. The same applies. There's a lot less of the ET involvement now because of the peace treaty, but there's an awful lot of humans who have doubles, including Mr. Trump if you look closely enough. So the hidden power brokers above the political theatre you mentioned, most are not human. Most we're not human. They're gone. Most of the top structure has collapsed. It's been taken down. What are they? Variant species, which we've covered extensively in the must listen to shows. From where also covered extensively in the must listen to shows. What do they look like? I've given some descriptions here and there, and perhaps this person who asked that question and the word demons comes to mind. No, demons is a different thing altogether. These were more physical entities. Demons are largely non-physical in its real term, which is jinn. Now, you can call people demonic because they've acted like the demons, but most demons in essence are all non-form. Some will argue differently on that, but that's my understanding anyway. Is there a widely known power structure working in Ukraine? Yes, the Nazis, Langley too, and a number of democratic politicians, along with NATO goons, so they can attack Russia. Are they using vaccines to turn children gay, and can something be done to reverse it? I don't know whether they're using vaccines, but they've been putting stuff in the baby's milk formula for the last 50 years, which, as you would, the person who asked this question, you should remember the mother care scandal. They were putting what they call gender bending stuff in their kids' milk formula. There's a number of things you can do that can change the balance of the XY chromosome, and yes, they have done it extensively. Do you think this administration will ever declare us sovereign? Well, Trump keeps mentioning it, so maybe he will, once certain clowns are dealt with. Will law immediately change and all bar attorneys go to re-education camps? They will need retraining, but it'll have to be transitioned like everything else. You can't just throw them all out and say that's it. You know, it cost a lot of people their jobs, and this is where sometimes people don't think. We all get it, you know, like saying to the IRS, just shut it down. Well, it's going to cost a lot of people their jobs. They're not going to be happy, and you have to phase in and phase out, you know. And this is where perhaps the likes of John Darash and co with their common law or natural law could be set up as a temporary transition to handle certain cases that would be brought up, whilst certain lawyers retrained in common or natural law, and we got rid of the maritime legalese babble. Will the original constitution be automatically stored? It will, with sovereignty. Sovereignty implements that. Happy birthday to Rochelle. She wanted a shout out, and so now you have it. Is there a war going on in Africa? I think it's best to say, when hasn't there a war been going on in Africa? Right throughout history there's been war there between the peoples, and yes, they can blame the white man coming in, but there was violence on a massive scale, and slavery, and some very poor human rights abuses on their own people, going back many thousands of years going on there. It's a lot of it is to do with regional tribes and clans fighting, being pushed, shall we say, by certain rogue elements into playing games down there, and they're being paid to do so, a bit like Boko Haram. We'll have more on him later. The African people need to come together, and that applies to all of us. The tribes should not be separate. They all work together at one point. And they can go on making excuses about it's the Europeans, which they have played a big role, but only because they allowed them. Their people sold their own people out, or a certain few did, to be given a few guns and some pieces of paper, and it's got out of control. The African country, if they all came together, can have a big impact on the world, because of their geograph and demograph as well. They can throw people out and go, the likes of the UN, the likes of Citibank, who's essentially their proxy central bank. Throw them out. Let's not be fighting neighbouring countries because somebody else said so many hundred years ago. Let's move on, and work together. Why are we still in Afghanistan? Poppies. Is there looking glass technology? No, that's gone. Its light went out on January the 1st, 2013, and it won't be coming back on either. And yes, there is stargates there. Do you think it's possible to produce a list of almost 500 aspects of life that we need to clean up to restore balance? I see it as a handy tool for the groups to work from and use as an inspiration. I see it as more of my free time being taken up. I think I'm kind of doing too much at the moment with so much that's going on. It would be useful. I think one of the members had a go at it, and I didn't get a chance to look at it all. But it's small steps. It's not like we can tick off all the boxes as it goes along. But everyone has different interests. Some they want to do agriculture, and some want to do aquaponics, and some want to clean the oceans, and some want to clean the deserts. There's all different aspects to it, and it's small steps until we have bigger numbers. So no, sorry, I don't have the time to do that. What is the deal with the gas prices? makes me feel like the goons are up to something, and I was wondering if you knew. Yes, I did knew, and I did warn of it. Was it 6, 7, 8 weeks ago in the intel? I did tell you they were going to choke the gasoline and flow of oil, which would then push the prices up, and that's exactly what they've done. Right, that's the Q&A for this week. Apologies to the ones whose questions I haven't answered. They're all still on the list, and eventually I'll get round to them. You know, I've started posting the show of a Wednesday, so I don't get too many questions because I had that many to catch up on, and I will get through them all eventually. Right, this before we go into a music break, this next bit was read out as part of the guidelines of the new THI state groups. So you need one for each state, and also country groups. I think on a brief check, we're close to half of the states being formed now, and there's about 15 to 20 countries. Well, 20 to 25 countries outside of America that's now formed country groups, which is good. And here are the guidelines, and I've got a few more pieces I need to add to what was read out on Saturday on the Zoom call. I want THI groups to form into 50 state groups, one per state in America, and the EU and other countries to create their own groups. For example, THI Holland, THI Sweden, THI Fiji, which has been set up this week, I think, and they can combine with other groups as they see fit. Each state will appoint a leader for that state based on a state group vote, so everyone has the say, and it's up to the leader to follow the guidelines that are set out in general in this piece, and also in line with the other state members. You know, we have to be flexible. It's not my way or the highway, you know, and the only reason for appointing a leader is so I have a point of contact within that state, which makes things easier for me, so I don't have, like it is now, where everyone's bombarding me with private messages and I need to speak to you with issues, complaints, questions. It's just taking up too much of my time. Now, the reason why I say states and not cities or countries, or counties, sorry, is we don't have enough people for cities or even counties. You know, for cities, if you're going to set up groups, we'd need around 25,000 Facebook groups if you're going to go city to city or town to town, and even the counties we'd need 3,300 Facebook groups or MeWe groups. Or we just keep it simple for now and have 50 state groups, and when each state grows, those in that state group can decide whether to form into counties or cities, and each state decides their path only. And essentially this is about each state growing their groups. Now initially it's about getting the message out of THI, but there's an end goal with it as well. And once sufficient people in each state reach certain numbers, and it becomes more beneficial then to have county groups first and then on to city or town groups, the latter of which is the circles expanding that I speak about. Currently, as we are now, we are starting off with a few dots in any given state. That is why it's a statewide group. Now it's important the members go in the groups of their state only, otherwise it gets confusing. This will become more prevalent as to why as time moves on. You still have the Facebook and MeWe pages to be with your friends, but these are working groups per se, not just hangouts. Each group, be it state or country, should create a structure and a database of members and also their skill sets. That will be for the purpose of the next phase. This is for this phase. And arrange to meet on a call. So your state calls maybe once a week for your state members only, not for people from other states or other countries. That call is for your own individual state or country. And you could discuss things relevant to their state only, and only their state or country members, and you could discuss projects, investigation work, which will become clearer, ideas for the state and or the group, and appoint tasks for each state member. Arrange calls for that state to be posted in the state group page only, please, to avoid confusion, not on the main THI or MWI page, your own state page only. So what I'm looking at is maybe once a week or once every 2 weeks is for your state members only to get together and discuss ideas for your state. Then you can then engage, as with regards to the states, you can then every 2 weeks engage with all the states, not Europe and not outside, just the states. Now for Europe, you would engage, if it was Holland, you would engage with all the countries in Scandinavia, the UK, Ireland, and the rest of Europe. You know, keep it regional. If you've got a number of African countries, you can engage that way. And obviously, the Asian and Australia and New Zealand will engage. Your 2 week call will engage them all, so you can share ideas. Now, once a state reaches 50 members or more, it should be considered by the group the possibility of moving out of Facebook and onto a blog or a website to post your info about the state projects and whatnot. But it does cost money for a website which would have to be at this point shared by the members of that state. Now every 2 weeks or a month a call can be made whereby all 50 states get together to discuss how they are progressing, put forward ideas that will be helpful to other states, discuss projects, ask each other for help with different things, and like I said, the same applies for the EU. Every 2 weeks they would combine, and Australia, New Zealand and Asia the same. Now once a month arrange a call for all 50 states with all members initially, with me, for state group Q&A only. No show stuff discussions. This is about the groups. So that will be once a month. Now, a couple of rules about there will be no separate groups created that are associated with THI outside of the THI state or country groups without approval. Some were creating side groups, you know, and the idea of that is to create a global network of us all pulling in the same way. But what I'm trying to do is standardise everything, not create chaos, which is what's unfolded this week, which was kind of unfortunate. But you know, we have to get back into away from chaos. Currently the whole world around us is chaos. We have to get back to basics and standardise things. Keep it simple is my motto. So if you come up with simple ideas, I'm happy with that. So we don't want to be creating splinter groups which can create the classic divide and conquer. Everything has to be open and all inclusive. On your state groups, there will be no private selling of personal goods on the sites. If members wish to sell stuff on the THI state sites that provides funds for the People's Club, then that's fine. But no personal selling is allowed. Using the popularity of THI for personal gain is not what this group is about. I personally have not received a single cent for running the People's Club Foundation for the last 3 years to date, and neither has Holly and neither has Mark. So it's only fair no one else gains personally. The People's Club is about providing funds for projects or the needy within the group. Other countries outside of America can arrange their own funding or donations for their country and their group, as they don't currently have a foundation set up like America has with the People's Club. Now, the one thing I would like to add, which has now started to happen after initial hiccup, is those creating THI state or country group name. The name is THI, not Truth, Honour and Integrity, because the reason I stated that is because there's a difference in the spelling of the word honour between America and Europe, and we want it all standardised. So it's THI only, 3 letters, and the name of the state, or the name of the country only. That way it's easier to find via the search engine, whether that is in Facebook or the MeWe groups. Now eventually it will expand out. Once the funding comes out, that THI state will change to country or state .thepeoplesclub.org, and THI at that point will cease to exist. We will have the People's Club shows, which will be about the projects. Now, the whole purpose of this exercise of THI groups is to get people to work together within their own state or their own country. Now, initially, it's about getting the THI message across, sharing ideas, learning to work together, which is an important step. As evidenced this week, it is not as easy or as smooth as we would all like to think. For too long we have all competed against each other, and we've forgotten how to work and speak together. This is the old system, and we are creating a new one, which will, as I've said, will always have hiccups. It always does when you're transitioning anything. But remember, we all have an equal say in this and don't need one ruling over the other. That is how they did things. It never worked for us, and it ultimately failed for them also. As what happened is they turned on each other, which is what's playing out now with the factions. All down to power tripping. I don't want us to repeat that. Look at the core pirate structure to get to the top. People trample on each other, including their own work colleagues, just to get more pieces of paper and status, forgetting the basic human need of caring for each other. Those at the top of the core pirate structure are not there because they are the best or have the best qualities. No, they're there because they forgot their humanity and entered into a Darwinian world program of dog eat dog and survival of the fittest. They're there, in this case, is who is prepared to be the biggest shit, bully and sell their own granny to get to the top. And models go out of the window. This is not what we want to replicate. So just because suddenly you can have a say in matters does not mean only your opinion or ideas has to be the way forward. Again, that is repeating the old system and thinking. Cooperative, not co-pirate. Flexibility is required, and remember, a true leader is not at the top. Oh no, but the bottom, guiding those above, around, or in front of him or her. Like the wolf pack, the leader's not at the front. This is not a pyramid-style control group with me or you as the capstone. That's not what we're creating. That leads to complacency. It can lead to idolatry and becomes a single focal point when the object is for us all to become beacons and way showers. Millions of Neos working together, not just one. And essentially THI would be tasked of changing the world one person at a time, one step at a time. Not waiting for the change, but being the change. And that ultimately starts with you. And ultimately, the state or country Facebook and MeWe groups will expand from state or country THI groups into state or country the people's groups when the funding arrives. This is the stage one, getting people to work together, learning how to interact with each other again. This then puts you all in prime position to arrange for funding projects in your own state or country. That's what it's leading to. But first we have to learn to work together again. And that in and of itself is a ripple in the pond of real change. That is both internal and external. Just try to accept we are in paradise when we are seeing and understanding something new. Our God should be change, our religion should be understanding, and searching for the truth is our greatest social challenge and purpose. I'll be back with the intel after this break. Hi all and welcome back. There's a key line in that song which has been a cornerstone of what I've been saying over a long period of time. And there's a choice we're making. We're saving our own lives. This is what sticks out from that song. Because essentially that's what we're doing. You know, with or without funding. Funding helps things along, but there's so much we can do regardless of the funding. Even getting people to talk to each other from different countries is a major change. We've all got preconceived ideas about what a Russian's like or what an Australian's like, and stereotypes, which once people get together and break through that barrier, you'll find most people are just the same, regardless of colour or which country they came from. You know, and this is what we're trying to do. You know, people keep telling me that Jesus is coming to save us. Well, we've waited 2,000 years. It doesn't look like it's happening. We've heard from the alt media for the last 20 years, the RV is going to save us, or the Pleiadians and the Arcturians and all kinds of other exotic entities are coming to save us. Well, they never. Politicians, Mr. Trump or Putin's going to save us. Well, we're still waiting. Whilst we're waiting, we're not developing. So that line there's a choice we're making here. We're saving our own lives, is essentially what we're doing here. Now, there will be things that will come up. We'll probably have another Zoom call at the weekend, and people can come up with their ideas and different ways, and that's fine. And I want to thank a few people who have helped in various ways this week. Lacey, Marcel and Marjoline, Mark Lacasse, and Alan from formerly of OYM, now Circle of White Light, they've put a lot of effort into it, and we can all go forward. Right, let's get into the intel. First off is a warning. Now, although we have cops in America who listen to this show, but a warning to the jackbooted violent thugs operating as police in France. History will not look back on you kindly, kicking and beating children and the elderly. You will be remembered as those who stalled the inevitable progress. Now, most will remember and point fingers at you, but you all know, sadly, some people will react rather badly against you, and you will pay a heavy price. Now, this message applies to all cops everywhere. You are the front line of protecting their system. It's not ours. A system that works against us and also you, and also puts you in harm's way whilst they hide in meeting chambers or in bunkers. A bit like the military generals, really. Humanity is rising, and your violent thuggery will not be tolerated, and you will pay a price for that choice. Choose wisely. Monday. Set the stage again for the Federal Reserve, which is defunct but continues to operate with restrictions. They promised to recapitalise all the banks on Monday by 10 o'clock, and then by noon. Predictably, by noon, that never materialised, as despite claims by several other alt-media clowns, the RV never took place again. It's since failed again, since Monday. I rarely report it now because it's just beyond stupid. And a word of warning to our members. They are using the potential at this point of delivery of certain funds from the trust to be passed off as the rollout of the RV. Don't fall for it. It is not the RV. It never will be the RV. Banks are getting real desperate now, and this is why they are telling their customers you must have a certain amount in their accounts at all times to keep the collateral levels up, and so they can fake the books. Message to all members: be the change. If they're telling you you have to have $1,000 or $1,500 in your account at all times, be the change and ensure you have zero amounts in their rogue banks. It's your money, not theirs. Who are they to tell you how much you should put in your account? Be the change. Tell them to go and F themselves. Join a credit union or the bank of under the mattress. It's not like you're going to lose interest, is it? You'll save on $15, $10 to $15 a month bank charges per account. But you're not going to recover that back from interest, are you? For most people anyway. Also on Monday, the Pentagon was threatened by the Chinese elders, and also the Treasury Secretary Stephen Mnuchin. This could get real interesting now, is all I'll say. Tuesday became stark reality that Mnuchin and crew are blocking funds from the Mana World Holding Trust that was being cleared directly to the Pentagon. Basically, they told the Pentagon to go and F themselves, in not too uncertain terms. So if anyone in this country is under any illusion anymore, still, this puts everything, this show, and what Kim has been telling you directly, yes, you the generals, and you the politicians, this country has been hijacked and is ran by people intent on the financial destruction of America. Pure and simple. The country is being ran by dragon groups, SSP, fake Chinese elders, Rothschild's elements, and fake mercenary or private security groups. Now, whilst it's frustrating the funds are being blocked, this may well work in our favour. More of the people within all government departments will get to see the real issues facing this country now. It's in their face. They will find out what all of our members are now aware of, but many outside of our group are not. Next item. There is a load of gold floating around Africa currently that is actually owned by the Man of Wealth Holding Trust, and it was housed originally in Saudi and has been trying to be sold privately, first in Sudan. Quite who can afford to buy large volumes of gold in Sudan is beyond me. And also recently in Mali. Now this is a scam connected to the Boko Haram group, and essentially what they're doing is trying to sell this gold is a cover-up to a previous crime by Boko Haram of sending and selling tungsten-based gold in Africa. Oops. And this has been sold to African governments. It's time those African governments got together and ran that group out of town. Big time. They're in with the cabal. Next item. All banks in America were caught out on Tuesday. Big time. Because we blocked access to the Fed and the Treasury altogether, the banks were caught this week given backdoor access to their banks, to the Fed and also the Treasury. Now, recent intel about the Treasury and the three suspects and their interfering with the transfer of funds were dealt with. I'll tell you that. Those three were dealt with, except Mnuchin's still there. Heaven knows why. So the Feds and the Treasury tried to get around that with demanding banks install backdoors in their systems so they could monitor and block funding. Now, actions were taken and all banks had all of their logins into the banking system cancelled as of Tuesday. So they had no access to their systems, so the transfers on hand that day to the Pentagon could be pushed through. The Pentagon confirmed receipt of the funds, which suggests the funds for the public side may not be too far away, but you never know. See, some people are under the illusion you just press a few buttons and do this and do that and it just goes through. No, we've done a lot of things of removing backdoors and removing clearance accounts and all kinds of other skullduggery. 300,000 different access points into banks globally that were removed, servers removed, but that's not to say that they don't stop. You know, they have an army of hackers and people to do this all day. You know, Kim's Kim, and she gets help from me and members of the team. But the difference in resources is vast, and yet still they can't stop us in certain ways, and eventually we will stop them altogether. They know it. So the Pentagon confirmed receipt of the funds. The Feds then responded by announcing they would be releasing a further quantitative easing program. This because there's not enough money floating around. This is what I've been saying over the last 2 years, is once you cut out the super notes and block them from leveraging all kinds of funds that were already leveraged, there's nothing left. It's just one pot, and they're just swirling it around. And so the Feds decided they would release a quantitative easing program, which would be QE5. Now what happens with this? This floods the markets with fake dollars, and they are fake, as only Kim now can produce real dollars with the true allocation numbers. The Fed was blocked from it last year, from producing new dollars, and they also had their license taken away for those who are new to the show. Now, as the QE, quantitative easing, cannot be balanced by assets, this leads to inflation, which is a secret tax and devalues your purchasing power. That's why Trump fired back on him yesterday at the Fed. He called their bluff. Next item, the FDIC insurance account, which is actually part of the trust, and is over all the American banking system, was transferred to the Pentagon management for now. In essence, a replacement treasury for now. As the treasury is being manipulated by Mnuchin and the deep state goons plus the Chinese elders, and the reason for this is due to the FDIC was being used to transfer funds to Hong Kong again, at the request of the dragon groups and the fake Chinese elders, to facilitate their fake RV. Now, on Wednesday, Hong Kong demanded that the Pentagon then transfer the funds that Kim had sent to them over to Hong Kong, and the Pentagon told them it's not happening, which has caused much bedlam, I will say. I won't go any further on that. Now, other transfers of a more public variety have stayed on hold in banks since last Thursday. These were not pushed through by the Pentagon, which raises minor concerns at this time, but that can be overcome eventually. Next intel item, the issues in Venezuela now with certain military running people over are to do with Russian mercenaries sent via Cuba that are operating on behalf of the Red Dragon Group, not to be confused with the fake Red Dragon ambassador. This is an actual Red Dragon group out of Russia, old Russia. Now, these are old Gorbachev and KGB goons, which represent the deep state in Russia and are not connected to Putin, as I understand it. It's not just America that has deep state. Next item, issues now surfacing in Ecuador and related to Mr. Assange is largely down to Mike Pence doing backdoor deals, not at the request of the president, I might add. Mr. Pence will be exposed for many things soon. Next item, the Pentagon's money sent by Kim landed on Tuesday, was stolen and went out of the back door on Wednesday. And it landed in a back server of GCHQ in the UK, with the accepted involvement of the entity known as Hillary and the Blue Dragon Group, which she is the leader of, or it is the leader of, with input from the Templars. Now, GCHQ is the head office of the NSA, in case people don't know. Anyway, Kim located the funds and has returned it all back to the trust. And all I will say is GCHQ paid a price for that skullduggery. Next item. Kim will not be returning the funds, as Mnuchin has done a deal with fake Chinese elders to send all of the money to China. And they are planning on sending $2 trillion of American money and roll it out as the RV. Failed again, Mnuchin and clowns. Trump is now fully aware of the fun and games, and he's also been made aware of the blocking of the trust admin fees that are owed for past payments as far back as last year. Things are very, very fractious in the top end circles now, big time. And finally, we've had some breakthroughs. I won't mention names, as some are now realising what Kim in this show has said all along. This country is being financially assassinated. I will not speculate on what happens next, but all I'll say is the clowns are under. Hi all and welcome back. That was for all the clowns and the top people. They're under big pressure at the moment, and like I said, I'm not going to speculate on what is unfolding. It's getting rather heated, big time, and something will break external eventually. First piece I want to cover was a pointer from a news piece earlier, and now they want Trump's private finances being investigated. And this is following the failed Russian collusion that they wasted 2 years of our time on. Failed mental and physical examinations he had to undergo. Failed suggestions of ballot interference. And this needs to be looked at closely by every American. Forget political allegiances. Is trying to discredit the president, whether he's good, bad or indifferent, the only reason these people are politicians? Is that all they're paid to do? And people need to take stock and remember, politicians of both sides are there, or supposed to be there, to look after we the people and the country, which many people seem to have forgotten. Now, I don't care whether you like Trump or not, but this current government setup is hell-bent on running drama productions for the treasonous media to debate all day, because not one single mainstream media person has a thinking brain of their own to come up with relevant discussions, investigations or solutions for the people. And the people need to call the shots here, and we need to walk away from party politics altogether and push them on policies, not politics. That is the distraction, and start to focus on what is considerable issues that are pervading this country. It's a mess from top to bottom in all walks of life, and we have much work to do to correct it. And we won't get that by arguing whether Trump's private finances are relevant or not, or ridiculous Russian collusion, when Mnuchin, Hillary, Obama and others did real Russian collusion, like selling America's in-ground resources to Russia, the so-called enemy. Again, that gets forgotten. But as a suggestion to Mr. Trump, on a risk of escalating the problem of drama, perhaps it's an idea Mr. Trump releases all of his figures requested. And I've no doubt there will be things in there that many won't like. We know that. Not one single business person at that level is clean. Not one. But Trump only releases them when the Democrats release Obama's real papers and records. The Clinton Foundation hands over all of their financial interactions and with whom. Pelosi hands over her husband's role and gain in the Green Deal, and AOC shows how she really became a politician. All looked at by a private, independent commission, preferably with members of the alt media present, and then those findings can be released to the public, whilst the so-called politicians are told to focus on what they are paid to do, which is look after America and its people. Not drama. And this type of discussion and piece is relevant and useful for when people, our listeners are talking to the unawakened. It should encourage them to think for themselves for once, not just parrot portal people rhetoric. It's all drama. Trump's this, that and the other, Pelosi's this, that and the other, and it just goes round and round in a circle. Meanwhile, the country's burning, literally. Unfortunately, we've had more skullduggery in the alt media this week. And a word of warning going out to members of THI. We're also participating in a group known as Soul Tribe Sanctuary. Their leader, Malawi Nyatane, has now officially exposed herself as in bed with paid clown members, some of which are connected to the mercenary group known formally as Blackwater. Now, Malawi sent out an email message to David Ray, aka Bubba, aka Barry Bigham, whatever other name he wants to come up with, who spends all day thinking stuff up and putting it out on the internet for his whopping list of 30 members. And Malawi's been passing him information. Now, David Ray is a criminal in and of himself, who is paid by Eric Prince to dig dirt on Kim, I and the team, and when that failed, he just decided to make it up for people like Malawi. Now, Malawi, when confronted by me this week, subsequently denied it, but I have the email evidence of her doing so. And those of you who sent me emails complaining about her last year will see a common pattern. Malawi causes issues and runs, and leaves her entourage to face the music and clear up the mess. Not this time, Malawi. Too many have caught onto it, and you need to get your act together. Like Chloe in the past, always pointing fingers outside of herself, is a mask of inner issues that you, Malawi, have to work on. Now, David Ray is a guy who's in bed with criminal elements, pedos at that, of so-called undercover agents who all have criminal records, just like David himself. And one of their websites has no domain. In other words, it's fake. Another website is owned by a bent cop in India, and his own website is involved in scamming, of creating fake profiles and starting false evidence against people. And when the person he allegedly exposes on the website contacts them with proof of their innocence, he and his group demands or scams fees off them to remove them from their website. We have vast quantities of evidence supporting that. David and his group is not a criminal investigation group, but a bunch of scammers making shit up and demanding fees from their victims to remove them, using the now classic agency think tank tactic of accusing the others of what they are doing themselves. Now, David this week, in his ramblings, which is that's the least I can say, made it clear he's protecting the Federal Reserve. Oops, David. The very same organisation that has looted every American of millions of dollars, including him. You know, these sheep will do anything to protect their slavery shoes in the system. Now, I know some members were sad when I exposed Malawi, and I found it sad also. I don't like doing these pieces, but if people are going to not operate for and by the people and play games, then I'm going to out. And some question me and my reasoning why. Now, that expose was based on accounts from several of her own members contacting me after we had done the show together. Maybe now you people will have your answer. Her previous or current connections with the plethora of agents, trolls, monarch girls, witches and MK Ultra mind control groups ran out of Vancouver only adds into the mix. It's all very sad. And whilst Chloe was not entirely blameless in last year's episode, Malawi and her crew added whole new layers to it, to a point where Chloe was becoming suicidal until I stepped in, and then one of the members stepped in and helped her. She was in a bad way. At first I thought it was just Malawi's connections. Listen closely to this. But I found out from several sources, Malawi also has access to live satellite streams for locating anyone that pings or uses her website, and also has ISP tracking programs. Oops, not the average geek material stuff that. So anyone who visits her site flags up a live satellite picture of where that person is and a picture of their house or vehicle. Why would any average person do that? Explain that to your circle and repository, Malawi. As for David Ray, he was interested enough to write an article about my Patreon, so I changed the goal levels of it to fit accordingly. It's funny, David Ray and his crew never investigated the $29,000 a month David Steele's group was bringing in, but focuses on someone who gets $2,300 a month, which was higher recently thanks to one member who donated $1,000 a month for the last 4 to 5 months. And I want to say a special thanks to her. I won't mention her name due to the targeting goons. I know who she is, and I'm very grateful for her support, as I am with all other members who have contributed. Now, I think most people would agree you get full value for your contributions with the shows, transcripts and the input from me. It's just sad that others are riddled with envy and bitterness, exhibit their shallow selves for all to see. Now, currently my Patreon pledges and the goal per month is all public. and that was my choice, and that's something I wanted for complete transparency. But given what's gone on this week, I'm asking members themselves to decide, would it be best for it not to be public? If so, I will change it. And I'm asking now those in the Facebook and MeWe chats to now write public or private to decide that choice, and I will abide by your decisions. It's kind of sad that it comes to this, but so many people live very sad lives that do nothing to fix world issues, and these people provide no solutions whatsoever, but rather spend all day targeting the ones, or the very few of the ones who will do. And we can all blame ET interference and cabal interference all you like, but this is a human problem on a repeating scale, where we target each other instead of combining together. And it is humanity's main weakness that we have to overcome. Next news piece. Apparently the media over there is blacking out the importance of a Malawian teen by the name of William Kamkwamba. So we at THI will elevate it and his story. And the media representation of people of Africa is not too kind, passing them off as all savages and stupid, when clearly that's not the case. And whilst it does have a violence and abuse issue problem across the various African countries, not all should be tarred with the same brush. Now, William Kamkwamba, taught himself how to build a windmill from junk that brought power to his village. He learned from books that he'd read in the library, and essentially he was a farmer. He hadn't seen a computer, and certainly not many white people in his life also. But his mind prevailed, and his inventions made people's lives better. At age 14, in poverty and famine, the Malawian boy built a windmill to power his family home, and now at age 22 he speaks to TAD group for the second time and shares in his own words the moving tale of invention that changed his life and many others. Now, William Kamkwamba was born on August the 5th, 1987 in Dowa, Malawi, and grew up on his family farm in Masitala village, Wimbe, which is about 2.5 hours northeast of Malawi's capital city. Now, he was the second eldest of Trirwell and Agnes, who had 7 children, and it was William and 6 sisters. Oh, jeez. That's a tough upbringing. It's bad enough having 2 females in one house, but 7. Oh, my, dearie me, that's some upbringing, that. And William was educated at Wimbe Primary School, completing 8th grade, and then was then accepted to Kachikolo Secondary School. And due to severe famine back in 2001, his family lacked the funds to pay the $80 in annual school fees. $80 a year. I can see some American parents going, oh my God, you know. But that $80 a year taught a guy how to produce power for his village, and you're spending $10, $15, $20, $30,000 a year and producing what? Anyway, William was forced to drop out of school a few months into his freshman year, and for 5 years he was unable to go to school. And so, starting at 14, rather than accept his fate, William started borrowing books from a small community lending library located at his former primary school. And he borrowed an 8th grade American textbook called Using Energy, which depicted wind turbines on its cover. and he set about trying to build a windmill to power his family's home and stop the need for kerosene, which provided only smoky, flickering, distant and expensive light after dark. So first he built a prototype using a radio motor, then his initial 5-metre windmill out of a broken bicycle, tractor fan blade, an old shock absorber and blue gum trees. And after hooking the windmill to a car battery for storage, William was able to power 4 light bulbs and charge neighbours' mobile phones. This system was even equipped with homemade light switches and a circuit breaker made from nails, wire and magnets. And the windmill was later extended to 12 metres to better catch the wind above the trees. A third windmill pumped grey water for irrigation, and subsequent projects have included clean water, malaria prevention, solar power and lighting for the 6 homes in his family compound. A deep water well with a solar powered pump for clean water, a drip irrigation system and the outfitting of the village team Wimbay United with their first ever uniforms and shoes. Now, since receiving their sun and wind themed uniforms, the team has been on a winning streak that has brought the village together with much pride. Now, the windmill project drew many visitors from kilometres around, including Dr. Harford McHizim, PhD, the Deputy Director of MTTA, the Malawian non-government agency responsible for the community library, and he brought the press, including the Malawi Daily Times, who wrote a fairly long story about it. Soyapi Mumba and Mike McKay, engineers at Boabab Health Partnership in Malawi, blogged about the article, and the news of William's inventions reached Emeka Okafor, who is a program director for TED Global, a prestigious gathering of thinkers and innovators. And Okafor searched quite diligently to find William and invite him to the conference, and William's presentation led to additional mentors, donors and companies supporting his education and also further projects. William went on and graduated from Dartmouth College in 2014 and started his tenure at IDEO.org as a Global Fellow. And William's time at IDEO focused on human-centred design and sent him around the world working on projects ranging from sanitation in India to gender-based violence prevention in Kenya. And he's now working with WWII to develop appropriate technology curriculum that will allow people to bridge the gap between knowing and doing. Good stuff. WWII will distribute the content through e-granaries around Malawi and across the continent. Here to William Kawamba. Still in Africa, the Kenyan Catholic Doctors Association is charging UNICEF and the World Health Organization with sterilising millions of girls and women under the cover of an anti-tetanus vaccination programme sponsored by the Kenyan government. Now, the Kenyan government predictably denies there is anything wrong with the vaccine because they're all paid, that's why, and says it's perfectly safe. And the Kenya Catholic Doctors Association, however, saw evidence to the contrary and had 6 different samples of the tetanus vaccine from various locations around Kenya sent to an independent laboratory in South Africa for testing. Sadly, the results confirmed the worst fears. All 6 samples tested positive for the HCG antigen. Now, the HCG antigen is used in anti-fertility vaccines, but was found present in the tetanus vaccines targeted to young girls and women of childbearing age. Now, Dr. Nagare, spokesman for the Kenya Catholic Doctors Association, stated in a bulletin released November the 4th last year, "This proves right our worst fears, that this World Health Organization campaign is not about eradicating neonatal tetanus, but a well-coordinated, forceful population control mass sterilization exercise using a proven fertility-regulating vaccine." Now, the evidence of this was presented to the Ministry of Health, which is a misnomer, before the third round of immunisation, but was ignored. Dr. Nigere brought up several points about the mass tetanus vaccination programme in Kenya that caused the Catholic doctors to become suspicious, and he said that several things alerted doctors in the church far-flung medical systems of 54 hospitals, 83 healthcare centres and 70 medical and nursing schools to the possibility the anti-tetanus campaign was secretly an anti-fertility campaign. Why, they ask, does it involve an unprecedented 5 shots, or jabs as they are known in Kenya, over more than 2 years, and why is it only applied to women of childbearing years, and why is it being conducted without the usual fanfare of government publicity? They went on to quote, "Usually we give a series 3 shots over 2 to 3 years, and we give it to anyone who comes into the clinic with an open wound, men, women or children. But it is the 5 vaccination regime that is the most alarming, and the only time tetanus vaccine has been given in 5 doses is when it is used as a carrier in fertility regulating vaccines laced with the pregnancy hormone human chorionic gonadotropin," just about got that right, HCG, which was developed by the World Health Organization in 1992. Now, it should be noted that UNICEF and the World Health Organization distribute these vaccines for free. They never give anything away for free unless it's got nefarious purposes. And there are financial incentives for the Kenyan government to participate in these programs. When funds from the UN are not enough to purchase yearly allotment of vaccines, an organisation started and funded by Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, no surprise there, provides extra funding for many of these vaccination programs in poor countries. And these local disasters are a common reason UNICEF goes into poorer countries with free vaccines to begin mass vaccination programs. Now, last year, the UNICEF began a similar mass vaccination program with 500,000 doses of live oral polio vaccine to the under age 5. In the Philippines, after a super typhoon devastated Tacloban and surrounding areas, and this was in spite of the fact there were no reported cases of polio in the Philippines since 1993. It's all there. And a very similar mass vaccination with the live oral polio vaccine occurred among Syrian refugees in 2013, when 1.7 million doses of the polio vaccine was purchased by UNICEF, in spite of the fact that there was no cases of polio in Syria since 1999. 14 years with 0 cases, and then suddenly they roll out 1.7 million vaccines. Now, after the mass vaccination program started, cases of polio began to reappear in Syria. Go figure. At least in Kenya, Catholic doctors are acting and taking a stand against what they see as an involuntary mass sterilisation program designed to control the population of Africans. Now this kind of confirms what this show has stated many times regarding the World Horror Organization, because that's exactly what it is. Don't make me laugh with the health part. It's got nothing to do with health at all. The UNICEF, UN, injecting children eugenics first. There's a nice acronym for you. UNICEF, the UN, injecting children eugenics first. Both these organisations, along with Gates, the Gates family, are death and horror merchants, pure and simple. And just because it's not happening en masse in Western countries should not mean we have to ignore it. Like everything else you ignore, it eventually arrives at your door, which it has in New York, has it not? Now, most people struggle with the idea of organised death factories, corporations being set up to make us sick, harm or even kill us. But you cannot keep hiding behind your hands like a scared child watching a horror movie. This is not a movie, this is real life. World Horror Organization is part of the UN group and was set up whilst World War II was ongoing and was created in time for when Operation Paperclip was also ongoing. You know what their experiments are like. And the same Zionist scientists, not Nazis, Zionists, and their death by whatever means plot was then transferred to New York for Operation Destroy America. Don't believe me? Fine. You'll find out at your own cost eventually. World Health Organization is based in, guess where? Switzerland. No surprise there. In other words, Rothschild's country. Now, Geneva is also the headquarters of many agencies of the United Nations and also the Red Cross. Again, no surprise there. Now, the founder of the Red Cross, Henry Dunant, is credited with creating the development of the Geneva Convention. All very in-house again. Of course, the Geneva Conventions was signed there that comprised of 4 treaties and 3 additional protocols that established the standards of international law for humanitarian treatment in war, and was signed off by 196 countries. And yet the usual countries involved as pawns of warfare contravene those laws by veto voting. You all know what countries I'm referring to by now. Geneva is also the European headquarters of the United Nations, in the Palace of Nations building, which is also the headquarters of the former League of Nations. Several agencies are also headquartered at Geneva, including the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, the United Nations Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, the World Health or World Horror Organization, the International Labour Organization, the International Telecommunications Union, the International Baccalaureate Organization, and the World Intellectual Property Organization, all housed in Geneva, and no one's heard of it. Now, apart from the UN agencies, Geneva also hosts many intergovernmental organisations such as the World Trade Organization, the World Meteorological Organization, weather wars, people, the World Economic Forum, the International Organization for Migration, the International Federation of the Red Cross, and the Red Crescent Societies and the International Committee of the Red Cross, the World Business Council for Sustainable Development. You've all heard that term before. The United Nations Environment Programme and the International Union for Conservation of Nature, which they all contravene again. And last but not least, the Cabal wormhole escape plan after destroying this planet and the machine known as CERN, which was rendered obsolete for its primary purpose back in August of 2015, in case anyone's worrying about it. Don't. So there you have it. Switzerland, that tiny little country that was created in the chaos, that houses so much and yet does nothing. I must have read out about 14 different organisations, major organisations there, and they do what? Nothing. Never meant to, that's why. Final piece before a musical break. I'm just going to call him Ted Ross because his other two names are tongue twisters. He is the Director General of the World Horror Organization. Interesting terminology. General is a military post, is it not? Not a health post. Director General of the World Health Organization. And he was formerly a Minister of Health. And Tedros was able to form a close relationship with most global health key players, including former American President Bill Clinton and the Clinton Foundation, and also the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. It's all interconnected, you see. And this is the ground for the Clinton Ministry of Health Partnership. Oh my God. Ministry of Health, Ministry of Death, was built on engagement of equal partners, according to this article, and Tedros brought to the partnership the leadership to sustain focus on the selected agenda, the political clout to facilitate enabling legislation as needed, and the first-hand knowledge of what was needed. Sounds all very corporate bollocks, that to me. President Clinton and the Clinton HIV/AIDS Initiative brought to the partnership a commitment to assist Tedros' priorities in their network, which provided sources, money, expertise and credibility. The Clintons and credibility, no, that doesn't work. As a result, Tedros was able to restructure and reform the ministry in order to better meet its goals. Now, Gates and his foundation were supported by military, which forced vaccination on the villagers. We outed this story a while ago. The Gates vaccination program was run by the military. And they went into the African villages and forced vaccinated the children. And then the children started to die in large numbers. And the African people then warned the next village they were coming, and the children fled into the bushes until the military, with live fire, flushed them out, firing at the kids in the bushes. Now, does that setup sound like something that is healthy or considerate to the people? Shooting at kids to force them to have their death poisons. Tedros is from Ethiopia. No surprise there. The scene of the last Garden of Eden, done by the Kalimar peoples. And he was born in the Asmara under the Ethiopian Empire, also known as Abyssinia, which was a kingdom that spanned a geographical area in the current states of Eritrea and Ethiopia. that state began with the establishment of the Solomonic dynasty. Yes, that guy again. From approximately 1270, that lasted up until 1974, when the ruling Solomon dynasty was overthrown in a coup d'etat by the Derg. More dot connecting to the From Russia with Love series. We're going to have a music break and we'll be back with more. Hi all and welcome back. Africa, a fitting song. You see, we don't just cover things about America. This is a global thing, and we're all involved in it. And there's some heart-wrenching pieces in that, and also inspiration of William, that even despite all the restrictions and the famine, and he managed to rise above it all and help not only himself but many other people. And that's the type of leaders we want. That lad decided, I'm not accepting my ticket and I'm going to make my own, and did. Good stuff. Right, we still have lots more to cover. I think we're going to run over. I don't know how I managed to do that, given all the distractions early on in the week. But there's a few things that came up. And there was a piece in Alan's show on Sunday that highlights the massive overhaul of our mindsets in a way. And each of us is responsible for doing that, changing the way we think. And the question that came up is, why is Kim or Thomas in those positions? And the argument is, why isn't someone more famous, well known or wealth based doing it? Well, you know what, those famous people, well known and wealth based people who ran as trustees before Kim and I got together, or before Kim became the trustee, and they did what for humanity? Nothing. Mandela was famous, and he was also a trustee. He did nothing for his people. Marcos, likewise in Asia, nothing. Rothschilds became wealthy because of the trust, I might add. They weren't before. All famous and well-known people, are they not? And all did nothing. Gerard Rand and the Rand Corporation, they're famous, as is Procter & Gamble and the Thrive Groups. And what did their family backgrounds do for humanity? Nothing. Now Kim comes along and people ask, why her? Who is she? The question is, who are you to ask? And why is that question relevant? If I asked you, are you qualified to do your job? Where is the proof you are qualified? Most people would get defensive and or reactive. It's the way it is. And yet these same people ask that of others without thinking. And this is what this piece is about, is getting us to think different. So if you wish to know why Kim is in that position, that answer is, she is best qualified for it, period. Or you can, if you don't believe that, you can check out the multiple of shows and the Q&A sessions that have been done with Kim and decide for yourself from there. Now, the reason for this piece is not to validate Kim. I don't have to do that, or myself for that matter, but to get people to look at how they think and act. For an example, if you're going to demand Kim prove or validate herself, then I would like to ask you back, have you asked your children's teacher, your banker, your doctor, your insurance agent, your mortgage lender and your politician, are they qualified to do their jobs to represent you or your family? Please think on that for a second. How many do? Those I've just mentioned impact everyone's everyday life And yet how many of you have questioned their credentials? Like I said earlier, we're assuming, are we not? Again, it's not fact or truth, is it? We're assuming that your teacher is qualified and is not a pedo. You're assuming your banker is going to look after your money. Good luck with that. You're assuming your doctor is going to look after your child or family. Again, good luck with that. And we assume our senators are going to look after us. Again, good luck with that. And yet no one asks those questions. Yet some people come along on the internet to try and help us all and get grilled with repeat questions about their life and their background, which is fine to a point. But why the inconsistencies? So if you haven't done that, then you have to ask yourself, why? Why is it only the case that Kim has to be grilled, or I have to be grilled, queried or doubted, because you don't know her? But likewise, you don't know your child's teacher. You don't know your banker. You don't know the private details of your doctor, or nurse, or politician, or mortgage lender, or mechanic fixing your car. You assume because there's a mechanic in a mechanic shop that he knows how to fix your car right. It's not always the case, is it? So in a system of change, the last thing we need is some famous TV personality being in front of the trust or the People's Club in some sort of fake glory role. The so-called glory roles will go to the people that drove the bus before these clowns realised there was a bus. The listeners. Just like me and Kim, ordinary, everyday people trying to do what is best. If you want famous people, go back to the mainstream media and see how much they're going to help you. Those harvesting agents have devoured your life force energy with their constant demands of look at me and look at how important I am, because I'm on some giant movie screen, some small TV screen, or as a politician. If they all looked after the people, we wouldn't need to be doing this movement. Your famous peoples you demand have all been involved in some form of criminality and done some of the most heinous crimes you can imagine. And yet some people ask for these to be a front for we the people. Think different, please. We the people is not about so-called famous people. So is it not ironic that two down-to-earth people with no elevated status, balanced egos, service to others who won't be thrown off track or bribed, are the very ones to drive this movement forward? Whether that's Kim or I or someone else of those qualities. If that is not how you are thinking, then clearly you have insecurity issues or an ego imbalance that only you can correct. It's not my problem. It's not Kim's problem. It's yours. And no matter what answer I give as to why Kim is the trustee, will that appease people with that type of thinking? It just won't. But let's look at some possible answers as to why Kim is selected. Does it alter in any way what she has and is still doing? Let's, for example, say Jesus picked her. Will people believe it? Pindar picked her. Will people think she's part of the system? Putin picked her. Same answer as the Pindar. Source or God picked her. Will people believe it? Trump picked her. Half will believe it, half won't, depending on political persuasion. The British royal family picked her. people will think something else. So you see, at the end of the day, it's not really that relevant who picked it and why, but what has she done? Is not that the key factor? The personality doesn't really matter, and I'll give you an example now. And just to make it clear to Mr. Munchkin, this is a hypothetical scenario, which is not real, idiot. But what if Mr. Trump was removed as the president and George Bush Jr. came in and announced sovereignty, declared the military American only, removed the Fed and the IRS, and eliminated income tax, plus drained the swamp? Would that bother you? Or would you be pleased at what he did? You see, the personality doesn't matter, does it? It's what you do that counts. No one on this planet is squeaky clean, and yet people go to great lengths to dismiss people or find faults in the very people trying to help you. And yet the same people will not question a doctor, a nurse, a banker who has their money, an investment broker, or a politician. They'll just assume that they are the best at their job. So the question is, why not assume Kim is? Things to ponder. As we did 6 to 7 months before it broke on Nexium, there's another group I want to highlight, and it has been done by some others in the alt media, but we're going to highlight it a bit more on this show. I won't give the full details, but it's a Beverly Hills group called Sanctum, spelled SNCTM. These have eyes wide shut type parties. I wonder if that's the same one David Wilcock goes to. Yes, we have the evidence. Erotic pool parties where everything goes for the rich elites and private members who pay between $10,000 to $50,000 to become a member. I suspect this group is going to get outed fairly soon. It's a bit like the Hefner Playboy Mansion on steroids. All the Hollywood elites go there, so you know what they're up to. New Nazi-style tactics to create fear, panic and control the people into forced vaccinations. Africa? No, America. Oh dear. And it's time people recognise the Fourth Reich in all its glory. Yes, you heard that right. I remember stating that back in the early 2000s and being told it can't happen here in America. My reply was, it already has, like 60 years previous. Health officials said on Friday that nearly 700 people at 2 universities in Los Angeles have been ordered to stay home because they might have had contact this month with 2 measles patients. And at one point, roughly 1,700 people were under home quarantine orders. But by Friday, health officials had cleared more than 1,000 who had to come forward of proof of vaccination. All very Z papers, please. Is it not? Same thing. Now, the highest number of actively quarantined people, 628, was connected to California state, Los Angeles, where a single measles patient created hundreds of possible exposures by visiting a campus library the officials said, and that number includes at least 106 staff members, according to the university anyway. And they issued a blanket order that asked anyone who had been in the library on the 11th of April between 11 and 3 to quarantine themselves, notify health services and establish they were immune before they were exposed themselves to the public, according to Barbara Ferreira, Los Angeles County Public Health Director. Now, in a separate story from the Portal people, just to add the fear factor into the mix, a cruise ship with nearly 300 passengers and crew was ordered quarantine in the Caribbean port of St. Lucia this week after an alleged case of measles was confirmed on board. And this is what they do. For those who don't know, MMR is the vaccine for that, can lead to permanent deafness in the ear on the side of the vaccine. My ex-wife went deaf weeks after that vaccine. Now, what this is a classic program seeding episode, and reminiscent of the live drills they do so often, that serve no purpose other than to create fear and make the public uneasy enough for them to demand actions, which they have already prepared before it started. And the question people have to ponder on is, are they trying to replicate a Kent State University scene again? Given it's the 51st anniversary of that incident this week, and I bet that's just made a whole lot of people feel a lot older. Yes, 51 years this week. Saturday. Patterns repeat, you see. When the public rose up in the late 60s, the system smashed them, as not enough supported it. But this time it's different. More are aware, and I suspect the arrest of the militia guy mentioned last week was not about that particular guy, but a warning to all the militia to stay away from future events. This is how they work. Remember, they never do things for one reason only, and I suspect they are brewing something up in the schools and universities again. And remember, some of the clowns serve as fried within universities. So there is your dots connect. Julian Assange, born in 1971. His birth parents ran a touring theatre company, but his father abandoned them. And when Julian was 8, his mother, Christine, married a member of the White Brotherhood, aka the family, or Santinnan Park Association, which is a private psychiatric hospital on the outskirts of Melbourne, Australia. Now, in the 1960s through the 1980s, the Santinnan Park Association received CIA/Sandoz LSD-25. LSD, for those new to the show, is the red pill. Oops. So all the QAnon's talking about red pilling. It's a CIA program, LSD. Sorry. No pills, please, blue or red. And the psychiatric hospital was part of a New Age colony. Goes back to Blavatsky and all that. With about 200 members, and they were all professionals. That's a laugh in and of itself. Psychiatrists, medical doctors, 25% were nurses and lawyers. I wouldn't describe those particular professions as professionals. Ranking civil servants and also social workers. And the allegations were that these people used their authority to collect kidnapped children Sound familiar? And as many as 28 children have been collected under the custody of the director Anne Hamilton Byrne, a theosophist. And children were selected for their Aryan traits. And this cult is well documented from the Australian investigations and court proceedings highlighted in the Oz media at the time. Now, according to Assange, his parents broke with the cult back in 1982 until 1990, and they lived on the run, moving dozens of times. But during this period, Julian was charged with computer hacking by the Australian police. Likely trumped up. And that's all Assange has said about that particular incident, claiming he doesn't remember Hamilton Byrne or anything about the cult, except that there's pictures of him there. Now, cult members have disclosed the children were collected for a scientific experiment. Although Hamilton Byrne remained silent, members disclosed that Hamilton Byrne predicted a global holocaust which wipes out most of humanity, and she was preparing the cult children to be the inheritors of the earth. Oh dear. Now, according to Hamilton Byrne's daughter, Sarah Moore, the children hadn't been told about that, and what they were told was that Anne Hamilton Byrne was their birth mother, even though their number and ages made that impossible. Cult. They were told that all other members of the cult were their uncles or aunties, even though some of these were the real birth parents of a few of them. In other words, they were the handlers. It's like the Svarley story, where the parents are the handlers. Now, the family, quote unquote, was related to the Nazi Lebensborn e.V. organisation, which was founded in December 1935 as a registered association ostensibly to foster population increase in declining pure Aryan stock in Europe. Now, the Lebensborn was under the authority of the SS, Race and Settlement Bureau. Lebensborn is best remembered as a breeding programme for SS studs with select Aryan female volunteers. I wouldn't describe them as volunteers, knowing what they were up to. And the project included social wankers of the Settlement Bureau, screening schools, and also hospitals in Germany and occupied Europe, looking for infants and children that fit into the Nazi eugenic profile of traits. Now, thousands of such children were drafted into the programme, were kidnapped and sent to remote hospital academy locations for the mind control programming, and there were over 30 of these facilities dotted throughout Europe, which processed as many as 30,000 new births. However, many more children taken from other countries were sent to special facilities for alleged Aryanisation, in other words, reprogramming. And the best source of information is the record of the 8th Nuremberg trial, the United States of America versus Ulrich Greifeld, or the Russia trial, RUSHA, and the infamous Dr. Joseph Mengele, Dr. Green, is generally remembered for lethal experiments on children at Auschwitz, which he then transferred to Canada, and was still ongoing until recently. And it's often overlooked that the purpose of his butchery was the scientific improvement of pre-existing methods of Illuminati-based mind programming of children. Illuminati trauma-based mind program of children. This is MKUltra. And its techniques were instituted in Lebensborn facilities. Now, Mengele, now known as Dr. Green, was the architect of MKUltra, which was run by the CIA, and was protected by the Office of Strategic Services, OSS, Operation Paperclip, and went to work for the CIA's top secret MKUltra projects, OSS is the predecessor name to the CIA. Same people, just different acronym. Mengele, who goes by the moniker Dr. Green, went on to torture, kill and program children in Canada, some of which are in the alt media. You heard that right. Hamilton Burns' White Brotherhood operation apparently was a continuation of Lebensborn and her obsession with white blonde uniformity to the point of bleaching the children's hair, and identical styles and dress is a bit too close to Lebensborn to dismiss. No, it's probably close to Pine Gap. Same people, remember. Maybe one of our Australian people will let us know how far in distance that those two facilities are. So now Mr. Assange was charged with rape following an allegation by a person by the name of Anne Ardin. Except Anne Ardin is no ordinary person either. You'll be not surprised to know. And it is significant that the case was brought in Sweden. Why? Because rape trials in Sweden have no juries. Oops. Which leads to a potential set-up case. And her claim of rape was not based on Assange forcing himself on her. Oh no. But an after-the-fact thought after Mr. Assange slept with her and then slept with a friend, and she accused him of not wearing a condom during sex with her, which was consensual, which is constituted rape. Yeah, you heard that right. Now, agencies often use girls as a honey trap. It's a common program. Often, once those girls have received extensive training in a program known as Monarch Girls, and there are at least 3 Monarch Girls, maybe even double that, connected to or within the alt media. They all have classic markers. Now, Ardin, a Swedish political analyst, also worked alongside or within the CIA in Sweden. You connecting the dots now? She was part of a program against Cuba, or an anti-Castro policy. She even wrote some books on it and was also involved in men bashing as a rabid feminist to boot, which is another agency think tank driven program, as evidenced by this piece. Now, a Swedish forum reports that she's an expert on sexual harassment and the male master suppression techniques, as she calls it. Once, as she was lecturing, a male student in the audience who was looking at his notes instead of staring at her, Anna Ardern reported him for sexual harassment because he discriminated against her for being a woman, and because she claimed he made use of the male master suppression technique in trying to make her feel invisible. Really? And as soon as the student learned about her complaint, he contacted her to apologise and explain himself. And Anna Ardern's response was again to report him for sexual harassment, again because he was using the master suppression technique, this time to belittle her feelings. Oh my. We'll have more after a musical break. Yeah. A rather apt song. People ask me for opera, so I'm going to play this. Hi all, and welcome back. We've gone on to 3 hours, and I've got another couple of pieces I think need to be covered this week. Things are rather fluid and active, and I need to get certain things out at certain times. And I've warned several times now about the seedy world of the alt media, riddled with LARPs, live action role players, agents of Langley, agents of the NSA, agents of NATO, agents of the FBI, agents of Mossad, faction-led groups. And by that I mean they will tell you lots of interesting intel about the other 2, 3 or 4 factions, but as a promotion of their own faction only. And in general, government agents are running YouTube and the alt media at the moment. Now, a story is broken within the alt media, and this involves Q, and it's suspected at this point the original Q was replaced, not confirmed. It involves 4 and 8 Chan, Abel Danger, Field McConnell, Jeremy Corsey, Israeli agent, Robert David Steele, CIA, Robin Gritz, FBI and CIA, who was involved in the 9/11, the Pentagon, the weapons of mass destruction, the Benghazi, the Boston bombing investigations, or cover-ups depending on which side of the fence you were on, and she's also linked with the McCabe, Comey, Strzok, Page and Flint story in the alt media. Thomas Paine of AIM, NSA, Jason Goodman, and the multiple named person that goes by David Sweggart, George Sweggart, and better known as George Webb, who has stated himself he works or worked for and with the CIA, and he also outed himself on a video that he works directly with Mossad. Now, Goodman and Webb are now both being accused of being paid $9,000 per month to be government agents. Have been accused. I'm not saying that's correct. They've been accused. Other names that have come up as agents is Craig Sawyer, Roy Potter, no surprise, Tracy Beans, Steve Pachesnik, Alex Jones, and the list goes on. All being part of a COINTEL program at best, and downright distraction and distortion at worst. Now, I'm not going to make points regarding individuals of who is what, when, where or why, or whether they are good, bad or indifferent, or whether all the accusations are true or not, only to highlight the cesspit that the alt media has become. It is riddled with agents disseminating disinformation of varying degrees of truth and lies. But what I will state is this is now developed into an all-out faction war being played out within the alt media that may or may not involve some or all of the above mentioned. Now, the above in some cases are involved in a high-level dick-swinging contest and varying degrees of misinformation and game playing, that the ultimate goal of which is to distract alt media listeners and followers, but also largely to get people involved in the drama of it all. Just like the Portal people, same system, with a backdrop to create an alt media database with algorithms and metadata. That's what people are not aware of. In a nutshell, the whole lot of it is propaganda or pro-pagan da. Now, the major common denominator amongst all this, which also rolls in Trump, Kushner and potentially Q, is the Jewish connection. That jumps out by scratching the surface, never mind going deeper down the rabbit hole. Now, I covered recently about a lawsuit. There's not just one lawsuit, alt media now, there's 2 major alt media lawsuits. Robert David Steele versus Jason Goodman and his crew at Crowdsource the Truth, I think it's called, and a person by the name of Dave Acton, which is aka David George Swigert, who is the brother of George Webb, who also goes by the name of George Webb Swigert. A common thing about these people changing their names, a bit like the actors and actresses. None of them have got their real names. It's all fake. It's the same program. Why are people changing their names? Kim hasn't changed their name. I haven't changed mine. Why so many in the alt media lead people have different names? And this second lawsuit is also against Jason Goodman. Also listed on the lawsuit is Quinn Michaels, described as Team Tyler Hacker Network, he of the fake quantum system background. Now, the lawsuit involves some incident that was live on air with drone footage on the Jason Goodman site. Now, Jason apparently owns or is involved in a drone company, as stated in the lawsuit, whereby the live broadcast turned into a dirty bomb hoax, and the whole of the port of Charleston was shut down because of it, costing somewhere in the region of $80 million. This is what is inferred, and what they're saying is that these people on the Jason Goodman site had prior knowledge of this or created the incident, is what's being inferred by the lawsuit. Now, this YouTube genre is turning into like the Super Soldier program and the people connected to it. This was prevalent through 2012-2016, which ended unfortunately with the death of Max Spears. Now, that incident with regards to Spears was a direct cause of someone or something from within the alt media. I'm not saying any more. And the show hosts of that genre were all connected to top agencies, the main one being MI5. Now this collection of YouTube COINTELPRO intelligence-led groups are in it as deep as the Super Soldier program and the narrative. It's the same, following the same path. And now another death of a whistleblower following her interview or meeting with Thomas Paine of AIM. Pick your poison wisely. All will bring you intel, but many are diverting you from the real truth, also protect their own crew or faction. It's a very sad turn of events that so much of the old media is ran this way, but I've been warning people for years, and people are saying, you're talking crap, Thomas. Well, no, I'm not. It's all been borne out. I outed Teal Swan 6 years ago. Some of you may have seen the article. I may do a piece on that next week for other reasons rather than just outing Teal Swan. Like I said, I outed her 6 years ago for reasons that have become obvious. Now, the faction show I did, which is 3.5 years ago now, was to prepare you for this time, you the listener, and give you a chance to see who is who. And maybe some people will need a refresher of that show, because once you discern which or any faction they operate from, then you yourself can work out where their narrative goes in a certain stream, or why it goes in a certain stream. Or if they are missing one faction out, then you can work out who they're working for. But something for people to ponder on when deciding who to listen to or not. If any of all of these high-end intelligence insiders are valid, then why did they not out about the missile attack on Air Force One until after the show? After our show? Why did none of them out the Pelosi 9/11 style planned event in January? Why have none of them reported the real issues in Venezuela correctly? Or the Citadel heist in the Treasury? Or the blocking of funds into America? Or the firing of Mnuchin twice? Or the fact that Trump and Mnuchin nearly came to blows in January? or the Fed being shut down, or the IRS sending $800 billion to the Rothschilds, which was clawed back by Kim. The American sovereignty letter. The list could go on. These are all so-called top insiders, they tell us, and yet miss so much of the top intel stories out of the shows. I was asked to listen to Thomas Paine of AIM last year, and apparently he had a whole expose on Trump and the Kim Jong-un story, telling his listeners he had all the on-ground and background story of what was going on at that event. And yet he never mentioned the missile. The biggest story of all. Now, this is not said to big up our show, that this show is better than theirs. I'm not interested in that childish level of games. Now, the reality is, all the figures for each and every show is fabricated anyway. We know that. But to highlight these people who are acting as top insiders, but are feeding you mainstream media style narratives and missing the real key intel out of their shows, what does that tell you as a listener? Final piece tonight. Recently we've had uplifting stories, but it's something that needed to be covered, and this is about Ireland. Now, in recent years, Ireland has been confronted with scandal after scandal of what is known as the Magdalena laundries. Institutions where, quote, fallen women, unquote, as they were called, they're known as those who had pregnancies outside of marriage and were confined in these institutions and used as forced labour. But now the spotlight has moved on to another of the mother and baby homes. And over the past 2 decades, Irish investigative journalists have uncovered a string of allegations against homes and the irregularities surrounding the adoption of thousands of Irish children to America in the 1950s and 60s. But this was going on in the 17 and 1800s with the abomination that is known as Ellis Island. For those of you not familiar, go and check it out. Awful. And the film Philomena, starring Judi Dench, good Evertonian, intensified attention on that story. In 2014, a local historian went public with a theory that almost 800 babies could be buried in a septic tank at a former mother and baby home in Tuam in Galway, Ireland. Now, there was a bit of an outcry which got dampened down very quickly, so we're going to highlight it again. That forced the government to act, but not quick enough. And they announced a full-scale investigation into 18 separate homes across the country, and this kind of backs up claims made by Kevin Annett about bodies being buried in various churches, reform schools, institutions and other places where children and mothers congregated. Now, the accusations against the homes include burying babies in unmarked and unrecorded graves, coercing women and girls to remain in the institution, poor medical care, high mortality rates for the babies, overwhelming pressure on mothers to allow babies to be adopted, where adopted means sold, emotional and physical abuse, illicit adoption, and that babies were effectively sold to families in the US and elsewhere without proper procedures or consent, allowing medical trials, hello UN, without informed consent, and the use of dead babies in anatomical research and also falsification of records. So why did Ireland end up with a system of mother and baby homes? Well, after independence from the UK, that's a lie, that's about as relevant as the American independence in 1776, it's all a lie. The new state had to decide how to deal with people needing government assistance. And the new government was also worried about sexual morality and unmarried mothers, according to Lindsay Byrne. And the Catholic Church had an important role in providing social services for the cash-strapped Irish state. Now, officials called on religious orders at the time to set up special homes, oh my God, to deal with unmarried mothers, like they're some sort of a disease, really. And these mother and baby homes received public funds and were inspected by the state. Yeah, right. And rights groups say that up to 90,000 unmarried women and girls had their babies forcibly taken from them since independence. 90,000 since 1920. Tiny country like Ireland, population-wise anyway. And the true figure will probably never be known. That's a low-end guesstimate. And the scandal of the treatment of women like Bridget, who was covered in this story, Deirdre and Catherine, has been brewing in Ireland over the last 20 years. And yet still nothing's been done. You'll find out why shortly. But the women say their experiences have never been officially recognised by the Irish state or by the Catholic Church. And there has never been a full state apology either. No compensation has been paid. And whilst visiting Ireland, Pope Francis made a general apology for the Church's treatment of mothers and babies, and senior Irish churchmen have also made expressions of regret. But there's been no comprehensive apology and redress from the Church in Ireland. Now, all three women gave evidence to the state inquiry back in 2015 and the Mother and Baby Homes Commission of Investigation. And on the 17th of April, it reported back on just one aspect of the scandal, the burial practices, ignoring all the rest. And according to the Commission, more than 900 children died at Bessborough or at a hospital having been transferred, but the burial places of only 64 out of those 900 children are known. And the Congregation of Sisters of the Sacred Heart of Jesus and Mary, oh my God, the order that ran Bessborough said it did not know where the other 800 children who died at the home were buried. Real caring, godly people then. And the Commission said that it was difficult to comprehend. And the Angels plot at Bessborough, the place Bridget was shown, only has one child buried there, the Commission says. But it's not thought to be Bridget's child, William. And the Commission thinks it's likely that at least some of the children are buried in unmarked graves in the rest of the 60-acre Bessborough site, but would not consider it feasible to excavate the whole area. At least 14 women also died at Bessborough, and their burial places are also unknown. Now, the gist of these proceedings is the evidence gathered by the inquiry cannot be used in criminal or civil proceedings, nor will former residents be guaranteed access to their own personal information. Sounds very ITNJ, that to me. This is what they do, these fake investigations, and they just whitewash it. But this is far from a one-off thing to do with nuns. There was another high-profile case of a nunnery doing the same back in Liverpool in England. They were selling off the children to Australia. packed them on a boat on their own, and off they went right round the world. Now, most of those children who were in that home were only there as part of the war evacuation for children. And these Satanists just sold those kids off. Disciples of God, they say. Evil bitches, if you ask me. Now, my own personal experience with these people was not too great either. Because my ex-wife was Catholic, she put them in Catholic schools with nuns. And one group of them was caught lying to get my son into trouble to protect something that a teacher had done wrong. Another group of nuns came to my door one day to let my ex-wife know she hadn't been to church, and then warned her if she didn't go to church, she would burn in the fires of hell. Nice people, these. I kid you not. And so many put their faith in these church people, and yet so many people have been stolen from, abused violently and sexually, disturbed for life, threatened, and worse, killed. And it's all covered up. Not just by the church or the nunnery involved, but right at the very top of the Catholic Church. And people wonder why I have no religion or believe in the church. The ignoring of these abuses, which goes through every single country, and yet still turning up to these churches and their ceremonies each week, is cognitive dissonance on an unprecedented scale. Going back to the Kim and I piece earlier, have you asked these church people for their credentials? Where is their donation money being spent? Are they pedos? Show proof of not being a pedo or a child abuser. If not, the question is why? I'll tell you why I have no religion. I'm not blinded by bullshittery. Simple as that. A proper overview of basic questions surrounding religion, given the plethora of cases like this, should set off everyone's alarm bell. Except to the brainwashed. But deep down, you all know it. It's eating away at you from the inside. And yet, because you have invested so much time and energy into it, you feel it is better to save face and continue. Well, actually, it's not. That institution, which is actually a sacrificial cult, is for people who cannot stand in their own power and sovereignty and rely on others outside of them as a crutch to lean on. Is that a harsh statement to make? To some people, yes. But I'll tell you what's harsh. The billions of people who have died and suffered on this planet in the name of religion. That's harsh. Including the country this piece was about. And it's about time to see through the illusion and stop making excuses for this heinous experiment known as religion. It's a harvesting, killing machine. It always has. By all means, pray to your God if that's what you choose to do. But please stay away from these portrayers of evil. The evidence against them is overwhelming now. It's not conspiracy anymore. It's all out in public. You don't need a church to pray. The most famous of the 26 different Jesuses told you that. This has been the Truth, Honour and Integrity Show. My name's Thomas Williams. Bye for now.